Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world who are here sharing their expertise and wisdom so we can all grow together. I'm your host, Heidi, co-founder of HLH Growth Solutions, where we help businesses grow their revenue through visibility and AI strategies. If you're new to this podcast and this is your first time being with us, welcome. I'm excited for you to be here talking, especially with my guest today. So without further ado, let me bring him on. Welcome, Phil Hixon with Superior Supplement Manufacturing to the podcast. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to dive in with you today. So Phil, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about Superior Supplement Manufacturing and your role within it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm coming up on 10 years with the company. I'm the VP of sales. It's kind of a unique story with our company because it was started 11 years ago by one of my oldest friends. So I had met him, I think I was 15, he was 16, and I'll be 44 this year. So we grew up together. And I had a unique introduction to the whole industry because back in 2011, I was one of his first customers to leave a review on his first supplement product he created. Oh. And, 5 years later, they're doing almost 10 million a year in sales, and they sold the business to private equity. So he jumped into the manufacturing space mainly because working with manufacturers is horrible. And he's like, I know I can do it better. And so, about a year into the journey, he called me, or a year and a half. It's like, I need you to come on board. And we'll probably dig into that a little more later because it's a funny story. But so, May will be my 10-year anniversary with the company. And, started out as just a sales guy and over time became the VP of sales.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Congratulations on 10 years. And yeah, that's an awesome relationship over since, 15, 16 years old. And I also love the stories where you hear somebody was doing something, they saw a gap, they saw a problem, and they're like, you know what, let me handle that. Let me fix that and make it easier for others because they know the challenges that they went through.
Exactly. It's generally how most businesses start, right? It's somebody's having a problem and they try to fix their own problem, and doing so realize a lot of people have that problem.
Can you tell us more about your role, VP of sales inside the company?
Yeah, so I deal mostly with clients face-to-face on a day-to-day basis. I mean, not always face-to-face. A lot of it is video calls and things like that. A lot of traveling to meet clients and things. But really, I'm helping people with a couple of things. One, formulation on products. Like who are they targeting? What ingredients will work to get an outcome for the end user of the products? Going over some of the regulatory stuff, sharing with them the pitfalls, because most people don't realize that as a brand owner, there's a lot of liability. And if you don't know these things, manufacturer's not going to have your back on it because you're selling the product to consumers. So just trying to educate people on the things that they can do wrong so that they don't make those mistakes. Every business owner makes a mistake, but it's a little different with losing a little money or having the FDA sending you a warning letter.
Yeah, you don't want that. And you just brought up regulatory issues. So let's dive into that a little bit. The supplement industry often gets labeled as, quote unquote, the wild, wild west, right? So why is that perception so inaccurate, and how regulated is the industry in reality?
Well, it's because the average person sees brands only. So they see the crazy stuff that some brands say. They make these wild claims, and because the FDA and the FTC don't have enough manpower to tackle those down, some of the people do get hit with them, but the others, my mother sent me a product that she thought was was a news article for a CBD gummy that was going to help with pre-diabetes. And I said, Mom, did you think this was a news article? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, no, this is an ad. And it's like, this is the last thing you should take. It's loaded full of sugar. So that's the kind of things that people see, and they're going to assume that the whole industry is like that. But what they don't understand is that we have very, very strict laws called good manufacturing practices, or GMPs, or CGMPs for current good manufacturing practices. And they're very strict. So kind of give you a background, whenever a product's being made, there's laws around when the raw materials come in, they have to be tested for identity. This is vitamin C. They have to be tested for microbials because it's one of the rare things that can actually kill somebody. You have salmonella in the ingredient that can kill somebody, right? So we have to test those. And also at the end, you have to test for microbials again, even though you tested the individual ingredients. But every step of the process is documented, from the testing to the weighing and blending to filling, if it's powder fill, if it's capsules, the fill weight. And when you're making a product, there's this thing called a batch record. It's a big, thick thing of documents where everything is written off. Even when you're doing capsules, you'll see that every couple of minutes we're weighing them to make sure that the weight's right. And if it's not, you have to shut down the machine. And when the FDA walks into a facility, you don't have a warning. It's basically, we're here, and they'll grab your bottle. If there's a bottle running on the line, they're going to grab that. They're going to ask you for all the documentation. They're going to walk through your testing. They're going to walk through every single piece of documentation. They're going to grab products from something called a retain closet, because we have to hold products for 2 years after we make them, just in case there's any issues. They're going to go through all the documents on those. And if there's a gross violation, you get something called a 483, which is a public notice that anybody can find that you've messed up. And a 483 basically means that your company will lose millions of dollars because no serious brand will work with you. So it's heavily regulated. Every single step of the way is documented, from the way you put your gloves on, you wash your hands, everything. So it's good for the consumer because it means the consumers are getting a really good product. There's some nuance in there around, getting what you're paying for and everything like that, but it is very regulated. So, and especially if it's being manufactured in the US, places like Amazon have a lot of Chinese manufactured stuff, which isn't necessarily bad, assuming that the brand did all the testing they're supposed to do on it.
So from your vantage point as a manufacturer, what responsibility do brands have versus manufacturers when it comes to the quality control, the labeling, and regulatory adherence?
So whenever you're talking to a manufacturer, people always ask, are you going to do a compliance check on my label? And the standard answer from manufacturers is yes. I always go a step further and say, listen, yes, but here's why we're doing this. We're doing this to cover our butts. Because if the FDA walks in while you're running your product and they pull it from the line, that's dead space and that's not efficient. It costs money. So we're doing it to make sure that we don't get in trouble, because we do have a little bit of responsibility on what we label, right? So if you had, during COVID, I had people saying this cures COVID. And I'm like, no, you can't do this. So we have a responsibility there. We have a responsibility for all the documentation on it. The brand owners have liability if somebody gets sick or hurt. They have liability in terms of what claims they're making, not only on their packaging, but also on their websites, their ads, all those things. It's a little bit less likely you're going to get in trouble for that because the FTC and the FDA have so little resources. But you are responsible for that. And you will have, if you're doing something wrong, eventually the FDA will reach out to you to either make you validate what you're saying or to basically say, hey, you're in violation of some law. And that's not a fun letter you want to get.
No, not at all. You don't want that envelope coming through the mail.
No, absolutely not.
So when it comes to regulation and things like that, it could be a little stressful I'm sure for founders, because they can assume that regulation means you're stifling innovation. So how do strong regulatory frameworks actually protect consumers and create better, more credible brands?
Well, if you ever look at some of the biggest brands in the world, you've noticed, like when I was looking for stuff for my mother who was dealing with prediabetes, luckily she got rid of it. Awesome. I went to a company called Life Extension, which is one of the big brands that I trust. And there was a blood sugar product. The only reason I knew what it was because I knew the ingredients they were using. But if you looked at the bottle, it didn't say much because they're not making claims, right? And so when you're a brand owner, you really have to be careful of claims, because these are not drugs, they're dietary supplements, and they can work wonders for people. I have a client of mine he's literally been our first client 11 years ago. He's still our client. We just shipped him product. And, his product helps people with migraines. A lot of his customers see a 75% reduction in migraines. He can't claim that, but that's what the people who are taking it are experiencing. So it's just really being careful about those things and try to find unique ways to market the product without making a claim that you're going to have a result, because that's a real quick way to end up in hot water, especially if you're in certain categories, blood sugar being one of them. People think they can stop taking insulin, things like that. It can actually cause death for people if you're over making claims. So it's really important that depending on the category you're in, you're careful.
So for entrepreneurs entering the supplement space, what misconception do they bring into early conversations with manufacturers?
A couple of the big ones are cost. And then how much regulatory or things that they're going to have to be mindful of, timeframes, and how easy it's going to be, right? So I'll give an example: cost, right? So people will come and say, hey, why is this product $7? The raw materials cost $3 based on ChatGPT. It's like, well, you have raw material cost, you have the shipping of the raw material, you have the testing of the raw materials, you have labor, you have overhead, and the manufacturer has to make a profit, right? And if you want to do it yourself and get the cost down, you're going to spend $3 to $5 million and a couple of years getting all the right certifications and things like that. So it's a pretty hefty thing, right? And if you're not in one of the big areas for manufacturing, there's not a lot of talent that knows how to do it. So you have that. Regulatory wise, I always tell people that you want to have a good regulatory consultant because your manufacturer is not going to be a regulatory consultant. Like when I came in the industry, I came from the real estate world. So I was doing coaching with one of the biggest real estate coaches. And he always had this mindset that if you're selling homes, especially higher end homes, you should have the best pool guy, the best landscaper, the best insurance guy. So when I came into the industry, I did the same thing. So I have liability insurance that's specific to our industry, regulatory consultants, marketing consultants, FDA attorneys, God forbid, right? Fulfillment folks. So that way my clients don't have to run around searching. I can just get them, hey, talk to Steve, talk to Bob, and can help them get those things done so they don't spend as much time. So regulatory, the ease, right? It's not 2010 anymore. You're not just going to put something on Amazon, it's going to sell. It's very competitive. The best products don't rise to the top. The best marketed ones do. I know brands that are doing 100+ million a year and their products aren't great. They can just market better than everybody else. Yeah, I'd say that's the big thing people don't think about.
Yeah, because they're really good at what their zone is, right? Which is creating that product, creating something that works. But marketing is a whole another animal. Before we dive into marketing, so this is a great time to do that. I want to hear more about your journey. You had shared at the beginning, like there's a story around you coming in. So can you share that with us?
Yeah, so I got a call and he said, hey, I have to get rid of a sales guy. I need you to come on. And at the time, I really loved the company I was working with. It had one of the best cultures of any company I've ever came into. And I just kept telling him, no, I don't want to. I'm good here. And he says, look, I need you to come on. You've seen what I've done with the other company I sold. Like, I think this would be really good. I'm like, I'm good. And he's like, look, it's going to be hard. He's like, you're going to make terrible money for 2 years. And then it's going to be good. You'll make more money than you ever did. And I was like, you're not selling it well. And then he pulled the friend card. He's like, look, I really need you. So I was like, okay. And boy, was he right. The first 2 years building a book of business was rough. Learning there's so much little nuance in the industry. So, I mean, I probably cost the company so much money not knowing what I was doing. But, he was right long term. And the great thing about our industry is that you kind of make friends with people, right? I have a rule when I work with clients. If I don't want to have a beer or a coffee with you, we're not doing business together. If you don't care about making good products, I don't really want to work with you unless the volume is extremely high. And they just have to be easy to work with because it's a partnership, right? If you don't have product, you can't sell, right? So, we're an extension of the success of the brands.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing the story. It's always nice to hear a little background about, besides just the business side of it, the other side of it too. So you brought up marketing, and that is a completely different animal when it comes to building a business. And like you said, so the supplement space is highly competitive. I used to be in the physical fitness arena, and I know all about, that was so many years ago, decades ago. So I can only imagine how much it's grown up to nowadays and how competitive it is. So let's just talk specifically for your manufacturing company, Superior Supplements. What are you doing? How are you getting out there and creating clients, for the, getting in front of the people that you support?
Well, we have a bunch of different things that we do. We've got a really great website that's really informative, that helps people. We also have a bunch of outbound campaigns that we do, reaching out to brands, because a lot of times brands sometimes are looking for backup, especially if you're growing fast. You need a backup in case your current one has a problem. So we're always doing that. We also have a big database that we developed over the last 11 years. So we're always checking in with people, to see how they're doing, if they need help with anything. Also, referring our clients to friends of ours in the industry, because I have clients all the time say, hey, can you do a gummy? I'm like, no, but I got the folks, right? Or can you do a liquid? No, but I have folks that can do it, right? Just making sure that you keep those relationships and you take care of people, because it's a relationship business. Some people, it's all about price. Those aren't our target customers, because there's always somebody cheaper. It's somebody who wants a good quality product at a reasonable price. So it's a little bit more of a consultative type process. And, because of that, let's say we're not great at something. I've learned long ago that if we can do something, but we're not great at it, I don't want to take the project on. because there's so many people that are great at it. So I'll introduce them to somebody great at it. And the amount of business that I've received from just saying, hey, we're not the best at this. These folks are, there's a level of trust that comes with that, because it's not just like, yeah, let's get a deal. I wasted a lot of time early in my career thinking I could help everybody, and it's just not true.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an important piece. A lot of people that when they come into business, they're like, I can help everybody, and they can.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't land with everybody. So
Exactly.
you have to want to zone into who that ideal specific person is. And it sounds like you all really figured that out. If you want the cheaper pricing, that's not for us. We create really high quality product. What's been some of the biggest challenges? Been in business for 11 years. So what have been maybe one or two biggest challenges that you all have faced in the journey, in the growth, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I mean, as always, especially early on in the business, cash flow is always an issue, right? And the only way to do that is to bring in sales, which is what we're good at. But you run really lean at times, especially early on. It can be tough, but you got to figure it out. So you got payroll and you have everything else you have to make. But the manufacturing business is a problem business. There's always a problem, whether it's a raw material that just out of nowhere has a problem finding it, or, I'll give a great example. I had a really large client I'm working with. It was their first run and they needed 100,000 units of their liquid. We could only buy the raw material from one vendor. We get it in and we test it, and the microbials are off the roof, like dangerous. And this is going to blow their whole quarter if this didn't get done. So luckily, in a normal situation, you would have to just send it back. But because it was a liquid that uses alcohol, which kills all microbials, we could test it and increase the alcohol content to make it work, which we did. It took a couple extra weeks. So we actually had to make some stuff, send it out for testing. And, we actually did redundancies on the testing. And by the end product came out well under the regulations. But if we didn't have that project would have been in a bad place.
Wow.
Yeah.
So looking ahead, let's talk about growth let me switch gears here to a different question. What's next for you guys over the next 12 months? What are the big goals that you have for Superior Supplement?
Really helping our clients launch new SKUs. So a lot of times as I'm working with clients, you get to know kind of intimately who their target audience is, right? So, let's say that, I have a lady that I work with who's great. She's an influencer, and, we started with her a little over a year ago. She works with a marketing agency that I introduced her to. She's doing over 100,000 a month in sales now. And so, it's like, hey, I know your target audience is this. We should look at a product for XYZ. So for her, it might be perimenopause, menopause, things like that, because these are people, her customers are experiencing these issues because they're in that age range. So it's formulating something that will work for those people to help them get rid of things like hot flashes and things like that. Obviously, you can't make that claim, but there's ingredients that actually have clinical studies behind them showing that there's some efficacy. So it's like, trying to help them win in the market because they already have an existing customer base. So it's like, okay, hey, what's a new thing that we can help your customers with? So it's really just doubling down on that, because, that's the easiest way to drive revenue is through existing customers.
So can you share with us because you just mentioned influencers, which was different than I was thinking. So can you share with us who your ICP is?
I can't because of NDAs. Yeah. I'd have to get her approval.
Sharing who she is. No.
Oh, okay.
Share, because you mentioned influencer, and I was just thinking other corporations where you're. Can you share who your ICP is? Because you mentioned you do outreach for your clients. So who are those people? So
generally existing businesses, right? Okay. So brands that you might see on Amazon, brands that you might see in retail spaces. We tend to focus on things that we're really good at: capsules, powders, tablets. Anything that has vitamins, minerals, herbals, things like that. People that maybe have a really strong brand, but they're missing certain products that could be beneficial to them, things like that. So we kind of look at all those different metrics. They obviously have to be moving some sort of volume, right? And so we'll want to, have them give us a shot. Take one of your smaller SKUs. Let's try it, see how it goes. If you like us, let's start moving other business over.
Amazing. So Phil, if I could give you a magic wand, and you can wave it over one issue or challenge you're having right now and go poof, and it goes away, what would that be and why?
So it would be a little bit of a unique answer. It wouldn't be for me. It would be for my clients.
Okay.
It would be the ability to market, because it's tough. And I would say 95% of people that come to us as startups never reorder because their businesses fail and because it's that tough. And I always say that there's a couple of things that can improve your chances of success. Number one is tons of cash. If you got tons of cash, it's easier to hire people who can market for you. Number two is marketing ability. So if you know how to drive traffic, whether that's to Amazon, your website, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, any of those things, or an audience. If you have an existing audience, the client that I was sharing with she's got about 100,000 followers. She sells better than a client of mine with 12 million followers because her audience is engaged and they know, like, and trust her more versus more of like just a influencer that people like their videos, right? So people go to her because they trust her. So those things will improve people's chance of success, but you just see a lot of pain with people's businesses that have great products, don't move because they can't get it in front of enough people.
Yeah. And I'm seeing that as well. And I think that's becoming clearer, I think, especially for branding partnerships. Yeah. And I'm wondering if it sounds like you're seeing this too, like more companies, especially if they're looking for a brand partner from an influencer, they're not necessarily looking at the number of followers anymore. They're looking for more the numbers of engagement when it comes to that, because they'd rather see somebody partner with somebody who has less followers and higher engagement, because that person's going to sell more product. Also, there's a lot of influencers or people out there with huge followings, but you see them always selling different products. And that's diminishing the trust 100%. With that specific influencer too. So yeah, I can see how she's really crushing it with her audience because she's highly targeted. And they, like you said, she's built up that know, like, and trust factor tremendously with the people she's engaging with.
Well, and when you're selling other products, you don't have control over what the products are. And there might be things about those products you don't like, or you want to change if you were to make it yourself. And, the bigger the influencer, the higher dollar number they're going to command versus maybe a revenue share or a commission, things like that. So having something where a smaller but more engaged audience will actually drive better sales than somebody, there's the outliers, there's the Kim Kardashians that anything she touches sells. But, some people, I know people with millions of followers that don't really sell product. Because for whatever reason, it's disingenuous to who their customers are, or like you said, they're hawking everything every other way. It's like people feel like they're being pitched constantly. And so they don't look at their business as a trust thing with their followers. They look at it as a money machine, and probably not the best way to go about it.
Yeah. So Phil, looking ahead, what trends in consumer behavior, product innovation, or regulatory shifts do you think will define the next, say, 3 to 5 years in the supplement industry?
I think there's going to be, I'm noticing since I started to now, regulations are tightening, which is good, but consumer knowledge is increasing, especially with the MAHA stuff and everything happening, and also when the economy gets a little tough. I wasn't in the industry during 2008, but I talked to a lot of brand owners and retailers, and I said, how was it? And they said, we had a dip originally when everybody was scared. He said, but then we actually saw an increase in sales because going to the doctor is expensive. So if we can kind of prevent that by taking supplements and things like that, so, we're seeing people learning about these things. You're seeing the advent of people actually going getting their blood drawn. Like I actually did this last year where I was really groggy in the morning, like hard to get out of bed. And I'm not a depressed guy. So I'm like, this can't be depression. It's got to be low testosterone. Went, got it checked. Had a dietitian who had me take a couple little supplements, and my testosterone went from 430, which is not good, to 790 in about 3 months, just fixing deficiencies. So I think that the consumers are getting smarter, which is good. And the industry is going really towards condition. It's not like the kitchen sink type thing anymore. It's like, hey, I'm dealing with XYZ issue. Is there something that can help solve that? So it's been going on for a while, but you're going to see it more and more. And if you look at Amazon, you can find something for your brain, your joints, pain. That's a tough one, obviously, regulatory wise, but all those different types of things that can help people. So that's going to be a continued thing, along with anti-aging is going to increase, I think. People are learning about compounds like urolithin A and NMN and things like that. So you're going to start seeing a rise of that as well.
And depending on what ailment you're looking for support on, there's so many different options with that one specific ailment. So we have to do our research. And with the evolution and growth of AI, it's much easier for consumers to do research now too.
100%. And our industry has, A lot of these ingredients, right, have been, especially like herbs, they've been used in like Chinese medicine for thousands of years and they work. And over the years, our industry has these things called trademarked ingredients where they'll do clinical studies on their ingredients for different things, right? Like there's ingredients that have shown to lower cortisol levels, get rid or lower hot flashes, helping with migraines, all those things, stuff in the gym. There's actually ones so people can include those in their formulas to improve the chances that people taking their product will actually experience the benefits of it.
So what advice would you give first? So, before I ask you for advice, can we dive into AI real quick?
Yeah.
How is AI, how are you seeing the evolution and the fast paced, evolution of AI affecting your industry?
I see it daily. So people will send me formulas and I can just tell based on the formatting that they got it from AI. AI does I actually use AI when I'm formulating just to find the research. Because instead of Googling research, it's easier to say, hey, what sources are for this ingredient? And then you can go look at the studies. But the thing that AI doesn't take into, I guess, into account at the moment is cost. Right. So like, oh, this is a great formula. It is, but it's going to cost you $40 a bottle. Right. So they don't take cost into consideration. They don't take feasibility. It's like, yes, this formula is great, but somebody's got to take 10 capsules a day.
Oh.
Right. So they don't take some of those things in. They don't take into consideration some of the challenges that some of the ingredients have when they run through machines. So maybe eventually it's going to get there, but it's not there yet. But it's a really great place for people to lay out their ideas, find ingredients that might work, things like that. People love to say, hey, this formula looks great. I'm like, it is great, but it's going to be expensive. And that's where kind of the just years of knowledge come into play. Like people will send you a formula and you'll say, hey, look, this ingredient's great and the dosage is great, but it's going to drive up your cost 80, 90%. For what you're doing, you should use the minimum standard for this. And I'll use an example of CoQ10. If you were doing a fertility supplement, that higher dose makes sense. Doing a general wellness one, you should go with a minimum viable number of 100 milligrams, right? So a lot of times you can look at things and depending on what the outcome you're looking for, you can tweak those formulas to make it more economical and make the product make more sense. But that's the thing that AI hasn't caught on yet.
So what advice and that's great information. Thank you. I didn't even realize that. Like you have to drill down even deeper. So I can see getting really excited going, oh, look at this amazing, concoction that I've created. And you're like, oh yeah. And let's look at this. Let's drill down a little deeper. So what advice would you give for those who are thinking like, oh, I want to break into the supplement industry?
Focus on good products. There's tons of bad products out there. You're going to pay a lot more to create something really good, but it's worth it for the end consumer because it's really a product that you want people taking this daily and buying over and over again. So you want it to work for people. You don't want to be a quick cash grab and market really quickly and make money and then nobody rebuys your products. You want something that's actually going to help people. And then make sure you have a solid budget for marketing. You should have a bigger budget for marketing than you do for your product. And, people all the time say, hey, I want to start with these 5 SKUs. And I'm like, okay, do you got a couple $100,000? They're like, no. I was like, start with 1. If you tell me money's unlimited, cool, we'll start with a bunch. And this is against my financial interest short term, right? Because if you order 5 products, I'll make more money. But I always tell people, look, start with 1 product, see how it's going. You might need to iterate that product a little bit. And then once it's going well, then let's go to SKU 2, SKU 3. Save that money for marketing because it's hard to break in. It's not an easy thing. So unless you're a guy or a gal who literally says, I'm one of the best marketers in the world, cool. That's a different story. But most people aren't, and just know it's going to take a while.
And go in with the expectation, not the wondering if, like expectation that there's going to be multiple iterations. That way, budget wise, you're prepared for that. And if there isn't, fantastic, you're a little ahead of the game. But chances are there's going to be some iterations. I'm sure you see iterations more than you don't.
Yeah, especially on the powder side, not as much on capsules. The biggest thing too is people always want to charge less for their products, and which I understand, but you need to make a margin. You need to be able to reinvest in product, reinvest in marketing. And, a lot of times I always look at it as like a dosage, a dollar per dosage type thing. So for example, my client that's got a migraine product charged about $30 for it. $1 a day, right? But depending on the severity of whatever you're dealing with, $2, $3 a day might make sense. It's like, a cup of coffee is $5 at Starbucks, right? And it's like people will gladly pay for that, but to improve your health, you wouldn't spend $3 a day, So it's really making sure you're pricing it right. You're not trying to chase to the bottom like on Amazon people do, because there's always somebody bigger that has more money that can buy larger quantities. That's going to take you to the bottom, or they'll manufacture in China and cut you down even more. So yeah.
Yeah, chasing price is not something you want to be doing, because there's always going to be somebody cheaper. But if you want to have a quality product, like you said, sustainability should be the goal.
100%.
Absolutely. So Phil, how can people connect with you and learn more about Superior Supplement Manufacturing?
Yeah. So our website is superiorsupplementmfg.com. My email is just phil@superiorsupplementmfg.com. That's probably the best place to reach out. If you've got an idea or you're looking to create something, kind of looking at, the pros and cons of joining the industry, I can definitely help you out with that. Or if it's something we can't do, I can refer you to somebody who can. I've developed a lot of relationships over the 10 years in the industry. So I know a lot of people in different kind of categories, so to speak.
Fantastic. A quick question before I wrap up here. Sales, you're a VP of sales. And at the end of the day, once your clients manufacture a product, marketing is key. And once they have the marketing in place, they need to make the sales. So that's another important piece. Do you have a team that you have for that handles or your sales? Or is it like, as far as how can you tell us how you evolved with the sales over the past 10 years since you've been with them?
Yeah. So, it's always having salespeople that can sell products. We learned early on, training somebody brand new in the industry, there's so many, it's tough. Right. And if you're coming into the industry without a book of business, you're probably not going to make great money, and it's going to be a big learning curve. But so we take kind of a different approach than most people do in our industry. So let's say you reached out to us and you're like, hey, here's my formula for joint pain. Quote it out. I don't quote anything out unless I have a phone conversation with somebody or a video call. That is a strategy to just quote everything. I want to look at it and see, what are their expectations? Who are they trying to sell it to? Do they have a price they're trying to hit? Because sometimes people think that they're going to get something for $5 and it's 13. A joint product's a good example because they can be really expensive. So it's like, hey, where are you going to be selling the product? Who are we trying to help? What's kind of our strategy for marketing? Because that can make a difference on ingredients we'll use. Some ingredients are less voluminous than others. Maybe you can use a trademark material that's really good for inflammation that has a really low dose. So I want to kind of make sure we optimize what they're creating versus just quoting something out. So it's like, hey, how do we make this better, possibly more cost efficient? So we just take a different approach than most people. Instead of like order taking, like, yeah, we'll just quote this out. It's a little more of a consultative type approach. And it's worked out really well for us. And I think our clients really love that.
Yeah, amazing. So thank you, Phil. For those of you listening and watching us on YouTube, thank you for being here. Phil and I are grateful. If you know of anybody that would benefit from this conversation and from learning more about Phil and Superior Supplement Manufacturing, please share this out with those people so we can support Phil. And we're grateful that he's here sharing his wisdom and also what's worked for them as far as growing the business and what hasn't worked. So if you can share this, that would be fantastic. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, thank you. If you felt you received a lot of value from this, then please feel free to hit that review button, 5 stars. We'd love it. That helps the platform also share this episode, Phil and Superior Supplement Manufacturing, with more people. And also, if you know of anybody that would benefit from this conversation, we'd love for you to share this conversation. Phil, before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to share or say that we didn't touch on or I didn't get to ask you today?
No, I think we kind of covered everything.
I appreciate you and your time. I learned a lot. I know our audience learned a lot. And so grateful for you being here today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to us today. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Business Growth Spotlights.